Our theme this year has often left me reminiscing about my years in Sunday school. This was particularly true of our reading this week, which is the definition of a Sunday school classic. The year is 1995, and it is the greatest year of Sunday school of my life. For 1 year only, all the Sunday school teachers were dads, and they brought a somewhat chaotic approach to lesson planning and a casual disregard for health and safety that one would expect of parents in the early 90s. How little regard, I hear you ask? This is the year that my dad took our entire Sunday school class scuba diving in our pool. That's how little they were worried about safety at Holy Trinity Anglican in 1995. This particular Sunday, we walked into the church hall to discover that one of the dads had built Mount Sinai out of chairs in the middle of the hall. It was a wonder in orange plastic and a miracle that no one was seriously injured. We spent the lesson taking turns climbing the mountain to bring down the 10 Commandments. The lesson is pretty obvious. Follow God's rules and you'll be okay. But I'm not sure the lesson was that meaningful for me. As an unemployed 9-year-old, making sure I kept the Sabbath wasn't a huge challenge. I mostly managed to keep my homicidal tendencies contained and focused on my siblings, who, to be frank, deserved it. And don't take the Lord's name in vain. Well, as a kid, I thought the F word was fungus, so no worries on that front. So kids, don't lie, steal, or murder, and everything will be all right. Sermon done. Or is it? The mountain of chairs and the importance of following the rules is about all I remember from that week. But I think when we focus on the rules, we can miss a really important truth. So let's try and forget what we think we know about the 10 Commandments, go back to the text, and find the messy, complicated bits that we might have missed. Are there 10 commandments? It's complicated. Although everyone agrees that there are 10 commandments, we don't all count them the same. The traditional Jewish understanding treats verse 2 as the first in the series, whereas all Christian traditions treat verse 3 as the first commandment. Catholics and Lutherans treat verse 4 as part of the first commandment, whereas all other denominations take this to be number 2 in the series. That's not confusing at all. Historically, it was common practice to refer to sexual offences as breaking the 7th commandment, which was great if you were Anglican like me, but makes no sense if you were Catholic or Lutheran, for whom the 7th commandment referred to theft. Okay, so the numbering isn't as clear as it could be, but obviously the Bible takes the 10 commandments very seriously, right? Well, it's complicated. The stories in the historical books never refer to the 10 Commandments, even in those cases where it's super relevant. Think of the story of David, Bathsheba, and Uriah. David flagrantly disobeys the commandments against both murder and adultery, but it's never mentioned. Throughout history, Christians have considered the commandments to be universally applicable. That is, the 10 Commandments are a set of rules which can shape our whole lives. Oh, it's complicated. For example, if we accept the commandment not to commit adultery as a universal truth, we have accidentally just created a really nice way to clobber anyone whose relationship we want to pass judgment on. Queer people, divorced people, or people who have sex before marriage. What adultery means in society, where marriage existed as a means of transferring women as property from their fathers to their husband, is very different to how we understand it today. Here's my hot take. I don't think it's a great idea to use a 2,000-year-old book as a literal guide to modern dating and relationships. But that's a rant for another time. It was at this point in my sermon writing process that I cried out to the Lord in the words of that immortal poet, Avril Lavigne. Why you gotta go and make things so complicated? This is also when I realized that I could just ignore the commandments themselves and focus on the why. Why did God give the Israelites the 10 Commandments? Has anyone reacquainted themselves with the Treaty of Westphalia recently? No, just me? Well, for those of you who don't choose to spend your free time poring over 500-year-old treaties, you might have missed that the 10 Commandments look an awful lot like the peace treaties used in ancient times to mark out the bounds of a nation-state. This was, after all, a group of people transitioning from being a disparate group of slaves into a nation. After hundreds of years as slaves, Israel was now becoming its own nation, so they needed to learn how to live together, and quickly. What makes the 10 Commandments different from other peace treaties? I don't think that the Israelites needed to be told that murder is wrong, and I certainly don't think anyone in this room needs to be reminded. What community doesn't espouse respect for the elderly, regard for life, property, and marital ties, adherence to the truth, and cultivation of good attitudes towards our neighbour? Only the commandments to worship God alone, the ban on idol worship, and keeping the Sabbath are unique to the Israelites. It's a neat narrative trick. The author has taken what we all acknowledge to be right and attributed its origin to God as a special gift for Israel. People all over the world may tell the truth and be nice to their parents, but when an Israelite does this, they are strengthening their community's bond with God. The first part of the commandments are unique to Israel, and the second part, well, that's just good advice. The 10 Commandments are made up of 2 blocks of 5 commandments, but the 10 Commandments rolls off the tongue better. The first part, which includes the first 3 or 4 commandments, depending on how you number them, describes our relationship with God. The second part, beginning with the commandment to honour our parents, describes our relationship with each other. In the beginning, God does not, as one might expect, go on to describe God's self with the big, heavy theological words that we have come to expect. God doesn't announce God's self as omnipotent, omniscient, or omnipresent. God reveals God's self primarily as the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. These are words of identification and relationship. As important as God's action is, I want to draw your attention to the second person pronoun. I am the Lord your God. These people have not traveled alone. They are claimed by God. The relationship is established up front. These people are a community. I think it's important that these commandments weren't just sent to Moses, a dude, but to the whole people of Israel as a community. As a kid clambering up and down a mountain of plastic chairs, I thought about the 10 Commandments as a direction to me, Catherine, an individual. But Moses gives the commandments to all the Israelites. Moses passes the commandments on to the whole camp. The language is all the people. The values contained in these verses describe the life of the community. They also teach us about the character of God. The values of life and trust that characterize the 10 Commandments reflect the character of God. The 10 Commandments isn't just a list of rules to be followed, they're about relationships. The relationship between God and the people of Israel, and the relationships between the people of Israel. The 10 Commandments were God's way of telling the Israelites what it means to be the people of God and how to live together as a community. Which led me to think about what agreements do we have to guide us as a community? What rules have we made for ourselves about how we want to love God and live together in community? What commitments do we make to each other and to God? A few things come to mind: the basis of union and the Luck Covenant. The basis of union is the document that set the stage for how Methodists, Presbyterians, and Congregationalists would come together to form the uniting church in Australia. The Luck Covenant is about how each of us want to participate in this community of faith. Every September, each of us is given the opportunity to reflect and discern the invitation to participate in the life and mission of Leichhardt Uniting Church. Next week at Pentecost, 6 of our friends will be confirmed into the Uniting Church. At that service, the confirmees and we, the congregation, will commit to each other to live out our baptism as a loving community in Christ, nurturing one another in faith, upholding one another in prayer, and encouraging one another in service. How do we make these commitments reflect the values of life and truth present in the Ten Commandments? How do we make these agreements real and meaningful and present in our everyday lives? How do we take these commitments seriously and be accountable to each other when we fall short of the standards we set for ourselves? Spoiler alert, it's complicated. This would be a much better sermon if I had a great answer. I know lots of examples of what we shouldn't do. I don't think we should list KPIs on the wall. I don't want to see anyone's bank statement to check that they are tithing. And I don't think having an attendance sheet to check who is coming every week is a good idea. It's too easy for these accountability measures to become control strategies. And while Rads is very charming, I'm not sure she's well suited to being a cult leader. So sorry to have underestimated you. There is hard work to do. For each of us to discern through prayer and meditation and journaling and singing, or whatever works best for you, how we want to be in community and what we have to offer. There is hard work for all of us to sit quietly with God and to ask, what do I need from my worshiping community and what do I have to give? One of the themes of Exodus is liberation. The Israelites' liberation from their oppression under Egyptian rule and their journey to become their own people with their own land. The liberatory promise of Exodus is far more radical than release from bondage. How can we live in the liberating love of the God who freed the Israelites, a God far too expansive to be contained by human rules? Just as the Israelites were freed from slavery and the oppressive rule of Pharaoh, so we too have been liberated from the bondage of rules that don't bring us to life. For many of us, we are being liberated from churches that use rules to control us. Maybe you, like me, are struggling to rip up an imaginary attendance sheet in your mind. For others of us, we are being liberated from a society that says our value is in productivity and that urges us to worship at the altar of economic efficiencies. Like the Israelites, we have been set free, and now we need to find a new way of being community. God isn't coming to us in tongues of flame with rules carved in stone, but I believe we can hear the voice of God telling us how to be a new community every week. I see God creating new ways of being in community as I watch the Lucky Ducks proudly march out each week. I hear God creating new ways of being in community as I listen to announcements about meal trains and protests. It's messy and complicated and hard. It's also joyful and creative and filled with songs of praise. The Basis of Union says the church is a pilgrim people, always on the way to a promised goal. Here, the church does not have a continuing city, but seeks one to come. I love that. Let us always be coming together to try and find new ways to live in the liberating love of God as a community, leaving behind old rules and learning how to love God and love each other anew. Amen.